All right, and we are live. This is Jason Hull. I'm here with Jameson Brandon. Jameson, welcome back.
Thanks, man. Good to be back on the show.
Cool. So, we're going to be talking today about, what you first mentioned over to me, you said we're going to talk about genius and speed learning. And I was like, okay, both of those sound really cool to me, really interesting. And, that we're going to be talking about unlocking your inner genius to grow your business faster. So if there's one thing that pretty much every business owner wants, especially my audience, which are property management entrepreneurs, it's to grow their business and to grow faster.
Yeah, I agree.
So tell me what really makes somebody a genius?
I think, like, first and foremost, let's just say that predominantly, I think most business owners, whatever space you're in, you want to be moving faster right now. It just seems like that's the hot topic, and so the only thing is that we run into a ton of roadblocks, and at first they're misdiagnosed because the awareness isn't there. It's almost like we're asking the wrong questions because we just don't know what we don't know. So we think it's issues like tools and resources and funding and money, right? Like those are all the common things, but it's not. Usually it's rooted to a much deeper belief and, like, neuron network that has, gone on unchecked over a period of time. So the thing about being a genius is, I think everybody is. Albert Einstein said, everybody's a genius, but the issue is that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to spend its whole life thinking it was stupid. So the problem is that, not only with learning in itself, but this title of being a genius, we've designated it in society, and we've come up with this set of rules for what it takes to be a genius. And when you hear the word, when you think about it, you think back to people like Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Benjamin Franklin, Edison. You think of people like that, right? And you think of modern day people like Steve Jobs and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and people like that. And we've got these preconceived notions that these people are somehow special. They're born with different DNA, with more chromosomes, with different muscular structures, something like that. And we immediately just remove ourselves out of the equation of possibly being a genius in some sort of way. Now, what I define as genius, so let's just take a sidestep, is we all have this magical ability. And we've all experienced this. This is when you're in this sort of state. You want to call it flow. I think it's a little bit beyond flow, where things just sort of effortlessly happen. Obviously productivity's gone up. I've talked about flow state before. That's a natural occurrence that happens as your productivity goes up. Time distortion happens. Things are just sort of happening, and you're almost getting like this compound interest effect on your ability to get things done. I think the genius state is taking that flow state that you happen to have and get access to in patches, and it takes that and makes it like an everyday thing. So when you look at people like Steve Jobs, when you look at people like Warren Buffett, like every day is like the best day of their life. Every day they're able to tackle these difficult decisions and face these tough things. And it's like, how do they do it? And again, that just all gives us proof and evidence towards like, oh, they're special, they're different, that we could never be that. And I don't think it's that at all. I just think that they figured out a few key things, and then they focus on those. And I'll share those really quick. I think early on, they found what makes them tick. They figured out that thing that they've just fallen in love with. Like you look at Warren Buffett, he started at like 6 or 7, doing newspapers at like a couple cents a piece. And then from there, he grew on into starting to read all the yearly end reports for publicly traded companies. He raided his dad's library and read every single book inside of there. Like, he was just, he found what he loved, and he just kept going after it. My brother was the same way. My brother loved numbers. So Warren Buffett fell in love with the game of business early on. My brother fell in love with numbers early on. I don't think it happens for everybody. It happens at different points when you kind of find that, like, that's my thing. And I think, this is conversation probably for another time, but I think school and a lot of the sort of path that we take mutes and hides us finding our kind of thing early on. And so that's why people don't find it till, their 40s, 50s, 60s, and maybe not even at all. But so these guys,
let's touch on that just briefly. So what you're saying is people need to kind of find their why, like what drives them, like what innately they're hardwired to be, interested in and find joy in and do. That's just them, right? And part of the challenge is that that's been interrupted or disrupted or damaged or prevented by, the situation in which they've been brought up, school, upbringing. So, and that's probably the majority of society, right? And probably the majority of people listening. So those people, let's talk about how that gets interrupted, how that gets prevented. And then maybe we could figure out how can we take people out of that? How can these people listening get out of that situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't even know where we would start with that, but I'll kind of start buckshotting a few things out. Public school system gets you to operate in a certain way. They base it off of performance. They base it off of numbers, how you do on your SATs, how you do on testing. That is their benchmark for how they gauge performance. An interesting book that I cracked open recently, I can't remember the title of it, but basically goes back to the beginning and the inception of Ritalin. Ritalin was the very first medication that was given to what they deemed as ADD and ADHD. Now, what was interesting is at the height of that, it encompassed 11% of the population in the United States. And it's like everybody was getting it. Everybody had the issue. And then you saw it kind of morphed into, and they started tackling the adult market. Well, that was actually created back in the 40s. A guy had created it for his wife so that she could focus more playing tennis. And he noticed that she could, she played tennis better and she obviously had these cognitive upticks. And that's when they kind of rebranded it. And they even named it after her. Her name was Rita. And then they created Ritalin. And then Ritalin, took the school system by storm. And they were starting to throw kickbacks to the schools for the prescription amount that they were writing, and the amount of madness that started to occur based off of, this whole phenomenon of ADD and ADHD. Like you look at it now, it's like a full-blown disease. And all it does when you have a disease is it enables you to act a certain way because you've categorized yourself. You've become this thing, you've identified with it. Like, for example, the identifier, I'm homeless, right? You're identifying with being homeless. So how hard is it going to be for you to get a job? How hard is it going to be for you to get a house? Well, that's all based on how deeply you identify with it. How easy is it going to be for you to get over cancer? It depends on how deeply you identify with it. So the same thing here, you have this dynamic that's basically trying to push and force everybody to be a performer. And to kind of bring in the second point that I was heading towards is that I believe the easiest way to break people down, there's all these personality tests. There's a simple way I've heard it broken down, which is called producer and performer. Producer is the dreamer and the thinker. Performer is the doer. Now, here's the issue. All of us are forced to become a performer in school because we're rewarded based on what? Performance, our grades, our academia, our performance. And that doesn't stop there. We get our first job. What are we graded off of? What are we judged off of to get a bonus, to get a promotion? Our performance. So regardless if you're a producer or performer, you're probably quite good at being a performer. That's true for everybody in the United States anyways, and every other country that follows our sort of system. And so that's where I think the big divide happens. Like you're talking about, well, where do we kind of go and pinpoint and find this breakdown of where this occurred? It occurred from the very get-go. Past elementary school, when art class is no longer, taken that serious, if you haven't fully committed into like the path of maybe being a musician and being in band or being on the acting and theater classes or being fully engaged in sports, like junior high and high school, all they're really there to do is support what you've already chosen to be. But not everybody is chosen at that point. And all the other things that are affecting you environmentally, at home, your parent pressure, your school pressures. Like I know for me, I wasn't decided on what I wanted to do in high school and junior high, because also too through elementary up until junior high, I was labeled special ed. I was labeled as ADHD. super hyperactive. And back then, this is the 90s, so they put you in special needs class. I mean, there's kids in wheelchairs drooling on themselves. Those kids had issues. They had problems. I didn't. I was just bored with the teacher. I just didn't want to focus on the topic of history because I just didn't see a point. Like, how's that serving me even to this day? It's really not. It's not even like fun fact and like little percentages that I can drop in conversation to make me seem smart. Like, it's almost utterly worthless. And so, I think that divide kind of starts right in the beginning, as soon as you get into the public school system, because it's rewarding the performer and it's muting out the creative side of most of us.
So part of the challenge is, from the beginning, we start getting measured by something, and whatever we're measured on, that's what the focus is. That's what the teachers are pushing. And we're trying to corral all of these people, students, to measure up to these standards, these tests, these standardized tests, these results that really only are probably geared towards one particular type of person.
Yeah. And remember, it's all working off of a bell curve. So the grading system and stuff based on the class, they're going to take the person who's the best and getting the highest score and the worst and try and create a kind of bell curve off of that. So, again, like that whole system that we're working off of doesn't really reward the creative type. Even in corporate America, you look at today, we're just now starting to crack the veneer on performers being in a CEO title and allowing a producer to be there. And I think one of the people that really pioneered that, two of the people, was Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. And the whole thing that happened with the computer revolution, like, that really showed the world, like, wow, you don't have to be like this analytical performer. You could be like a dreamer and still have a successful company. And so now you have a lot more of like the corporations starting to open up towards that idea, but it's still predominantly not widely accepted at all. But the reality is that you need equal part thinker and you need equal part doer. You need the creative type just as much as you need the action-oriented guy who's in the trenches getting shit done.
So I think another issue is in school is that, in our upbringing, is that school is very repetitive versus experiential. It's just it's a lot of regurgitation. It's like memorization versus experiential learning. And like my son Hudson, for example, he's very kinesthetic. He's definitely like more of an entrepreneur personality type. Some people would probably try to categorize him as ADHD, this sort of thing. So part of the challenge is that he shows up to school and he's already complained to me about art class, for example. And I said, what do you do? Why? He says, like, Wednesdays, he's like, I hate going to school Wednesdays. I'm like, why? Why don't you like Wednesdays? Because I ask him each morning, like, what are you excited about today? And he's not excited about Wednesdays. And I say, why not Wednesdays? Because we do art. And I was like, what? Like, what? Why don't you like art? He's like, and what I came to find out is that basically the art teacher comes in and says, hey, everybody, we're going to make this picture, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to make this particular picture. We're going to do it this way. And there's like zero creativity involved.
Yeah.
And I was
so
like,
they've even taken the fun out of art class. Cause it's like, if you were to invite up, 5-10 kids and say, hey, who wants to draw on the board? When you're a kid, everyone's going to run up and draw on the board, right? Like, that's how we used to do it. The teacher would just open up the chalkboard and we could all just start drawing pictures. By the time you're in junior high, high school, and an adult, how many people are going to come up and draw a picture? We all feel so stupid and judged and, inner about like how people are going to think of our picture that we don't even try. And so I think that coming back to the topic of genius and speed learning is, it's like, so much of it is de-learning the bad habits of the public school system, sadly, and how we were raised from our parents, how we were just told to go and get a good job and put in your 40 years and then retire. Like, all that shit has to be removed before I can even step into the space and offer in like my own genius,
So how do we start to disconnect from that? How do we start to shift our thinking out of like all of my performance is based on just, getting these numbers versus shifting towards maybe passion, what we desire, what our genius is.
I think that's a lot of increasing awareness. So you need to start asking deeper questions. And so let's look at somebody right now listening to this that's running a business. They're dealing with multiple employees they're already managing. They're dealing with different vendors. They're wearing a lot of different hats. You need to immediately ask the question, while you're doing this, do I like doing this? Yes or no? Yes, keep doing it. No, find somebody immediately in the next 5 days to take that task over. So I'll tell you, from me personally, that's been a huge shift for me. So this year, I've already brought on 3 different staff. And before in the past, I had upwards of 30 staff, but it was all just developers. I never had an assistant. I never had a social media person. We've had people running our ads in the past, but I still heavily micromanaged them, and they were expensive. They're like 5-10 grand a month. These are like top Facebook ad guys that you see all through your Facebook newsfeed all day long. And this year, like at the end of last year, I really came to the conclusion, because I ran an event all by myself, and it was so hard and so stressful. I just said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm going to really refine down, like, what's my genius, right? Like, what is the things that gets me excited and that I could do all day long, whether I was making money or not, whether I was tired, whether I was happy or sad. What are the things that I could do no matter what? And it just really wouldn't feel like work. And you ask that enough times, you really start to refine it down into real tangible stuff. The first few times, I think you suck at it. And that's true of anything. Like the first few times, you're still not really allowing yourself to feel out the question and actually give a real answer. And so when you ask that more and more, you start to come up with clear answers. And the reason why is because there's a quick little audit, and I don't think I have time to share it. Maybe we'll go through it a different time, but there's different reasons why we don't want to do things. So for example, like I didn't bring on an assistant for the longest time because of really silly things. I didn't think that I deserved it. I didn't think that it was appropriate at the time. I wasn't even sure if it was possible. All of these are the reasons why I actually didn't do it. But as soon as I did it, it was magical how much stress that actually relieved off of me. And I'll tell you, the number one reason why I didn't is because I didn't think that I actually like deserved a assistant. Like, who am I to have an assistant, right? We've predominantly heard of people that have an assistant are like important high-level business executives. And here's me just kind of running this solo little show. Even if I'm doing a couple $1 million a year, I really didn't feel like I needed an assistant. Like I deserved it. But again, I came to this conclusion. I asked these questions enough times to where I was just like, I'm not dealing with any of this mundane stuff anymore. And a lot of the email stress has been removed off of me. A lot of the day-to-day stuff, everything that we're dealing with, that I dealt with to get moved into the loft that I'm in, just gave it to them. Like all the little stuff that I would normally go and handle myself, going and getting groceries, going and getting my food, all handled for me. And
Right.
so when you start to remove those little things that disempower you without you even realizing that they're disempowering you, you ultimately, when you've removed enough of that, then all that's left is for you to go and do what you love doing. And at first, again, I think it's like a bump and grind process. So, and it's little by little. So right now I brought on the assistant next to social media. Then we're going to bring on a vlogger and have them do like a lot of the video work for us. And once I've removed those things, I've got a developer already. That's taken away like 90% of like my day. At that point, I'll probably go through a couple days, like truly, to where I'll just sit around like, what am I going to do today? Like, and I might even be bored almost, which I don't think you should ever be bored. But I'll go through a few days to where I'll just be like, what am I supposed to do now? Because you're so shaken by the fact that everything you used to put all this time and energy into, you might not have liked it, but you put a ton of time into it, is all of a sudden gone. So I think that's the simplest way. Instead of trying to go back and like heal childhood traumas and get hypnosis and take psychedelics and go on this huge spiritual quest to try and cure something, just stop that. Start where you're at and start to just really ask these tough questions, which is like, what don't I like doing? Remove the affordabilities and just start doing it.
Yeah, I think for me it was I mean, I think every entrepreneur gets to the point where they realize they can't do it all themselves. They need a team. And it's really challenging to give up because in the beginning they do everything.
Yeah.
They are billing, they are sales, they are marketing, they are, everything, and fulfillment, everything. And so to give up each of these pieces seems really scary to them. But if they're going to grow, they have to be willing to let go of this control and let go of doing that. I found that's a challenge. Right now, I'm in
Yeah.
process of letting go of sales, which is something that that I I'm good at, but I don't want to be focused just on doing sales. I want to spend more time focusing on content creation and developing new ideas. But I've always had an assistant. Like I love having an assistant. And when I don't have an assistant, like I'm always like, I need one. This is so having a team, having people to support you is a big deal. And I realized, when it happened for me, I was doing website design. I had this website design company, it was Open Potion. I was doing all these websites for people I didn't like. I mean, I was getting paid too little, and they were, they were some of the worst clients. They were micromanaging me, and they were telling me where to click, basically what to do. And I would just wake up in the morning and be like, I say to my wife, babe, I'm not working. She'd see me just sitting on Netflix, like I'm not working today. And she's like, are you taking like a U day or something? And she'd be stressing out, thinking like we need to get money in. But I was just like fed up. I was waking up like dreading dealing with these things. So I would just avoid it. And then I came across like Simon Sinek's video where he talks, this TED talk that went viral, where he talks, it wasn't even like a normal TED talk. It was like TEDx, right? And he did this, and the video quality wasn't even that great, but he did this talk about, the golden circle and these three ideas of why, what, and how. And so I was really curious, and it shifted my thinking. I was like, what's my why? Like everything should come from my why, from my purpose. And my why is to inspire others to love true principles. Like that, I love to figure out what true principles are. So those are things that work. And I love to learn those things. That's just fun for me to learn. And then I love sharing that with other people. Like I just would do that for free, for fun. That's what I do when I'm selling. That's sales for me, is just getting on phone calls and finding out their issues and helping them figure out what works. Mm-hmm. That's what my content creation is. That's that's the stuff that I love doing. And I realized when I got clear on my why, I was like, okay, here's what I don't like doing. This does not fulfill me. I hate making contracts. I hate spending an hour or two like drafting up some sort of proposal or contract. I don't want to do that anymore. So I gave that to somebody else to draft up and work on. And there were a lot of things I realized I didn't want to do or didn't enjoy doing. And then it got to the point where I wanted to spend, there were a lot of things I like doing. Like I like doing graphic design. I like building websites. I like doing this kind of stuff. But it got to the point where there was other stuff I liked more. Yeah. And I then needed to start giving those things up so that I could focus on the stuff that I really like doing even more. And that cycle keeps going in business. It gets to the point where you keep building your team, you keep building them up and giving them the stuff off of your plate. And so one thing that kind of shifted my focus was time management. So everybody gets so caught up on time management because they're trying to do all this stuff on their own. And so I realized that what's better than time management is just energy management. Like just what makes me feel good, what gives me energy, like what you were talking about, and what doesn't. And if I just focus my time and my energy and effort on the things that make me feel alive, that like give me energy, that fulfill me, that's exciting. Like doing this sort of thing with you here, this is fun. This is fun for me. I enjoy doing this.
Yep.
Me going and drafting up a proposal, not fun. Me doing support tickets, not fun. You know?
Yeah. And again,
But here's what's weird. Here's what's weird though, because I think the challenge that people think, that we mistakenly think though, is that I don't like doing it, so everybody else must not like it either.
Yeah.
I have people on my team that they don't want to be on phone calls. They would rather do support tickets. That's what they enjoy doing. They like that. That's the level. They're introverted. They like that that introverted sort of interaction with people. I've got people on my team that they just love doing graphic design. And so that's like my main thing when I hire somebody is I just say, just tell me what you really, really love doing. Like if you could just do that all day, what do you love doing? And if it's not what I'm hiring them for, they don't get the job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's, that's a big difference. So it's like, again, I don't think any of these geniuses had special traits or DNA difference. It's just that they figured out themselves much earlier on. And again, it's like there's a million different ways to skin a cat. So it's like people like you and me, we went through the process of being the jack of all trades, which again, you force yourself to get good at something really quick. Whereas it's the exact opposite almost of school. In school, you learn about the same stuff over and over for months and almost years, right? Even now to this day, I can't recall half the stuff I learned. Actually, probably 70, 80% of the stuff I learned in school, but I can tell you everything I've learned in the last year. Yet I studied that stuff in the last year, less time, and it took less of my focus. Like I wasn't sitting down studying it for 8 hours a day. So it's funny how it's almost flip-flopped. So it's the same, it's the same thing with you. We've gone through and we've become an expert at a lot of different things. So we're great at a lot of different things because we felt like we had to. Somebody like Donald Trump, somebody like Warren Buffett just said, I don't have to do that. I'll just find somebody who's already good at that. So whereas you and I, maybe we're trying to save $1 at the beginning, or we're trying to, hyper focus on staying small and keep the revenue tight. These people just said, nope, I'm going to go and get them right away. And that propelled them to get to that place of power much quicker and do the refinement that you and I are going through right now as individuals. And so I think a lot of people on this call, they're still, and that will listen to this, they're still going through that refinement process of letting go of the reins and letting go of like the ego control of all the pieces. But I can tell you that what you've been finding out over the last couple of years is that the more you start to kind of test it, so do I really love this? And how much do I love this in comparison to this thing over here? The more you keep questioning and filtering, you will ultimately get to the place where you are doing 1 or 2 things a day. And that is your absolute highest priority. And that's the thing that you're best at. And everything else is being handled by somebody else. At that point, business will grow so quick. That's the overnight success. It took you 10, 20 years and now you're a millionaire. Now you're a billionaire, whatever it is. That's part of the process, I think.
I think another factor is that when we know our purpose and when we know our focus, what then happens is we're able, like you said, to learn a lot quicker because we're focusing just on that one thing. We're focused just on that. And when we're focused on that one thing, there's always a lot of information, resources, and stuff available for that specific thing. And so we're able to stand on the shoulders of giants and take what they have, learn from them, and even take it further. And I think anybody that's been labeled as a genius probably stood on the shoulders of several other innovators and thinkers and, producers from the past.
Yeah.
And would openly admit that, I'm sure.
Yeah, a lot of them, it's like they had a mentor or...
Oh, you're cutting out. I think I lost you.
Here. You still got me?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. So I was just saying, like, one of the key points you just brought up is that they have a micro focus. They have a very thin focus. Oh.
I'm going to toggle the video off and maybe the audio will be a little more solid.
Okay, cool. Is that stronger now?
You're kind of cutting in and out a little bit, but
we were going so good there.
Well, just make sure nothing. It's all right. Just make sure nothing else is using the internet. Everything else closed down, and then we'll.
Yeah,
I think we'll be okay.
Just double check it really quick. Yep. Yeah, I got everything fully locked in. Just this. Is it getting better? Or is it the same?
Um, it's all right. Every now and then it's a little glitchy, but um, let's keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I
So
apologize
the
about that. So I was
no,
just
that's
saying
fine.
to wrap up that point is that, the people that are looked at as a genius, they have a very micro focus. Even the guys who have 15, 20, 80 businesses, you look at somebody like Richard Branson, his focus, even though there's hundreds of companies, is still slim. And there's an easy test of this, right? Like everybody's watched The Secret. They tell you that the minute you start focusing on a W, you see it everywhere. So all you're really telling your mind is to serve up more things related to this narrow focus. So whether it's a red BMW or just being the visionary of your company, like you will be served up with more support, everything in and around that when you slim down your focus. So it's still trying anything outside of that is still trying to multitask, and I think that's the issue. That's the issue with the growth problems. That's the issue with the revenue problems. Is you're still trying to focus on too much, and you need to thin down that focus even more.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, every single thing you add to your plate is dividing your focus.
It's
So if
another
you have
and
one
yeah.
thing and you add one more thing, you've divided your focus and attention in half. And every time you add that, it dilutes it even more. And so, and then we feel like we're just spinning our wheels. And so I find, internally for my team, it's best to have each team member have one primary focus.
Yeah.
They have one thing they focus on. And like I wanted to hand off the podcast production. And I was thinking, well, I've got, there's all these moving pieces to doing a podcast, right? There's the graphic design to create the images. There's the show notes and the transcription stuff. And there's there's the audio editing and there's just all these different pieces. And it was taking me like on average about 4 hours an episode. It was just crazy. Because you have to go through the episode multiple times, like once to, slowly to edit it and clean up stuff, once to, to create the show notes and all this kind of stuff. And so it was just taking a massive amount of time. And I enjoyed doing some of it, but it was just eating up so much of my time, and I'd rather be making money,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so handing that off. So one option was, hey, I'll hand this off to my team, but our focus is not podcast production and putting all of this stuff together and putting it out. And so we kind of tested that, and it was diluting everybody's focus on the team towards something else.
Yeah.
And so it didn't make sense. So I ended up hiring a podcast production company because that made a lot more sense. That's all that company focuses on. That's their whole vision. They've got different team members that handle transcription, that handle this, handle that. And so sometimes it's not even just hiring the right person. In fact, usually I recommend to clients, find a company that specializes in this, or find a software that facilitates whatever challenge that you're dealing with, because that's always going to be cheaper than trying to fill a bunch of roles to take that on.
Yeah. Yep. And I think, again, you just got to start chipping away at that little by little, because when you're trying to come at it the top down, which is what we're really talking about, and you're starting to slowly let go of the reins, is you're also always conscious of money. And for some reason, it's like you don't want to spend the money. You don't want to bring on another asset. You think you can't afford it. It's always going to be like that. But the minute you commit to it, the affordability all of a sudden is there. So the minute you say, okay, enough is enough, I'm bringing on an assistant, poof, funds are there. Everything works out. The minute you say, I'm going to bring on a podcast team, no matter how much money they are, poof, it all kind of works and handles itself. So it's really just us getting in the way of that natural flow. And again, that's what we're talking about with this genius state, and really getting to that high level of just focusing on the few core things that you should be focused on, that nobody else can do within the organization. And that, again, you see that everywhere. Like you see that with Warren Buffett, you see that with Bill Gates. Like they, in their role over the years, continue to be refined. So in the beginning, they might have been doing a lot of the grunt work, but very quickly they refined to being just this little tiny piece that they are today, which again is very appealing. because that's that cognitive bias that we all operate off of, which is called outcome bias. We see the finished product and forget what it took to get there. And we're so starstruck by the finished product that it actually derails us. And, I'm blanking on the word, but it basically makes us feel bad about what we've got going on because we're comparing ourselves to them. We're
Right.
comparing it to the finalized version that's had 40, 50 years of experience. I mean, come on, fair
Yeah.
fight.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, comparison when it comes to, genius and all this stuff can be, it can be a tool to be leveraged positively or negatively. We can look at somebody else and go, oh man, they're so far ahead of me. I'll never be there. Or we can also compare and look at others and look at ourselves, a year before or 2 years earlier or in the past and go, look how far I've come.
Yeah.
And really the person we should be comparing ourselves with is ourselves yesterday.
Yeah. If you're comparing yourself to anybody outside of an version of you, you're losing and you're just wasting, again, energy. Because everything, one thing I was going to mention earlier, you said that any new task that you bring on, any new thought that you bring on that's outside of your designated genius, think of it like an energetic loop. So you wouldn't just go into your house and just plug in 30 things into the wall and turn them all on, would you? Well, that's much what you're doing when you're taking on comparing yourself, when you're not closing out these loops, when you're not handing off these jobs and tasks to people that are designated to do them, and you're trying to, again, hold on to too much of the reins. Like, that's what you're doing, is you're just thinning out your energy and draining your life force, really. And then you burn out. Big surprise,
Right. Yeah. Because it's incredibly draining.
Yeah.
And this is where people hit these crises. This is where they're bouncing around from crisis to crisis.
Yep.
And because they're not staying in their area of genius and keeping their focus on what their area of genius is.
Yeah. And so, to kind of, summarize what we've really talked about is I believe that everybody's a genius in their own way. We all have our kind of genius state and thing that we're great at. We've all experienced that, to where we picked up something extremely quick. We were so excited about it. We delved into every, shred of information we could about that topic, and we learned it extremely quickly. Like, these things are not designated for a select few. Things are accessible to everybody. There's a deep structure to everything, meaning that you can reverse engineer what was done, the character trait itself, and you can start to apply those key pieces to your life and have a positive result.
Yeah, I love it. So I think one of the big temptations is when we have a need to know some new knowledge, or we have a need to do something, or we hear about something we should be doing, like somebody pushing, hey, you should be doing social media marketing, or you should be doing this, is the temptation is, oh, I need to go learn that now. And so I think one thing that entrepreneurs, I think, tend to have is this endless to-do list of stuff to learn. Oh yeah, I need to learn more about that. Oh, I need to learn more about this. And so they end up in these loops of just learning, where they're starting programs and buying into programs and getting different coaches for different things, but they're never really like wrapping any of those things up. It's this endless cycle of trying to, and again, it goes back to just trying to do it yourself and falling prey to this temptation that I need to learn it, as opposed to just finding somebody else that already knows that, loves that, and does that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's like, you got to go back to the basics here. Is it's like one thing at a time. So get your foundation set up. So we've got Facebook, nailed down now. Great. Let's move to Twitter. Twitter gets nailed down, or we've up on it because it's not our channel. Instagram, we got that down. YouTube. And it's like you're moving pretty quick through these things, but you're making sure that you've got standard operating procedures. You've got people in place to manage this piece before you're moving on to the next thing. And even you should have a process with how you learn, with how you take on the new topics. Is it going to be you that's going through the training? Is it going to be somebody else? Are you doing it collectively? How much access you have? How much are you like kind of overseeing this thing as it starts to flourish and as it starts to take off? Like, those things should all be baked into your process.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we run into, because a lot of entrepreneurs, we start out as solopreneurs. We start out as these individuals and we're doing everything in the business.
Yeah.
And then we have to start letting go of stuff. But then there's, like the E-Myth Revisited book and this sort of concept. There's sort of this mindset that we need to learn it and know everything about it ourselves. Then we can teach and somebody else to do it and document that process. And I think that's this mistake, or that's this challenge to getting stuff done. I would guarantee that some of these high level entrepreneurs and CEOs, there are a ton of things they don't know how to do
Yeah.
throughout the business and the organization. There's lots of stuff they're not good at.
And they're completely okay with that.
Exactly. Like they don't waste any
difference.
time digging into that or trying to figure out any of that stuff. They find people that are experts at that. And so I think one of the challenges is in this E-Myth philosophy that a lot of people subscribe to for a number of years is they're like, okay, I need to learn this myself, document all of it, and then hire the lowest cost staff possible to just be dummies and follow the directions.
Yeah.
And I've found, and I've tried that, and that doesn't work very well. The quality is poor. And I feel like it's much better if I hire badasses and hire people that are experts and that are in their area of genius, even though they cost more, and allow them to really do their thing and take ownership of that particular area. And the end result is just far better.
Yeah, you get what you pay for, and again, like the only thing that's slugging down that whole process is the individual, because it's like, tomorrow we could bring on every single asset we need and at the highest possible price. That would make most people, that would completely break them though, because they can't jump that quick out of a comfort zone. So that's why you see so many people, they have to like go through and like hire on somebody cheap, and then they end up not doing a good job, and then they hire somebody that's more money. Like you and I have already figured out that it's worth it to pay premium, because not only does that make me itchy that I'm paying that much money, and that gets me to go out and produce, and that gets me to go out and make more money and bring in more top line revenue and profits. Also too, I know that they're going to do the job. I don't have to question them. I don't have to micromanage. So it's like, what is that doing for me? It again, removing another element off my shoulders and allowing me to take another step deeper into my power, which makes me more money.
Yeah, I think that's a great question to ask ourselves in the business is, where am I currently a bottleneck slowing things down?
Yeah. We're getting in the way in a big way.
Anyone could look, like entrepreneurs love to have to-do lists. They have these endless to-do lists that some people call to-die lists. But you can look at this to-do list. Everything on that to-do list represents you as a bottleneck in the business, because it's stuff that's waiting on being done instead of being done.
Yeah.
And so I think a fantastic thing to do is actually do a time study, analyze your time for the week, just every 15 minutes, write down on a spreadsheet or a paper what you're actually doing, and then look at your time and see, is at least half my time spent on, production or on what I really feel like it should be focused on, rather than management and to-dos and tasks and this sort of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't mind, I want to I want to jump into the speed learning piece really.
Yeah,
quick.
That's what I was going to say. I want to hear about the speed learning. Okay, how do we speed learn?
Let's talk about it really quick. I'm going to give you guys some simple hacks on how to do this. First and foremost, let's remember back to any time you've learned something really quick. What was the first thing that you noticed? You loved the topic, right? So you have to fall in love with the topic, regardless of how you truly feel about it. Find a way, find a thing, find an entry into loving that topic. And that's going to go very, very far with the information getting past, bypassing the critical factor. Okay. Then the next thing we need to do is we need to break this thing down into micro pieces, and we need to study the pieces in little tiny chunks until they become a habit. Now, based off the tiny chunks, we also need to make micronized goals. so that we get those little upticks to dopamine and serotonin and all the feel good stuff based off of, hey, we just accomplished this thing. So we need to create a micro set of accomplishments or goals or some sort of measurement so that we know that we're moving forward in this almost imaginary timeline of start to finish. The next thing that we need to do is, I totally just blanked. Hold on a sec.
Let me recap. So we love the topic.
Yep.
You're breaking up just a tiny bit, so I'll recap it anyway. So
Sure.
One, we love the topic. We gotta find a way to we gotta find a way that this topic that we feel like we need to learn, we got to find a way to make it relevant to us, a way that we can fall in love with it and be excited about it. Like, if I learn this, it's going to open up these doors and windows to me. Number two, we need to break this into little pieces. We need to figure out, what are these little pieces? How do we break this down so that I can actually eat this? You can't eat the whole elephant in one sitting, right? You can't eat the whale in one sitting. So what are the tiny bite-sized pieces? And then what's the very next one that I can take? And then we need, by breaking it up into these pieces, we need to be able to measure these accomplishments. We need to know what these goals and these targets are, and so that we can see that we're actually moving forward. Because when, as entrepreneurs, when we don't see progress, that is such a huge killer of momentum.
Yeah, it is. And it almost like dies instantly. And that's where the next thing comes in, which is frequency. There's two laws. It's frequency and recency. So what that means is, first and foremost, when we touch something and then go away and touch it again and go away, that redundancy, like school, right? But we don't need years of this. It can actually happen very, very quickly, like in a matter of days. And we've tested this now. We're creating basically this concept that I want to roll out on a big scale and hopefully help change and shift the education platform itself. But we've been on a small scale with these highly personalized events. And one of the things that we noticed is that how we cycle people through is we keep touching the same thing over and over again. And then once that tiny chunk has become habitualized through the frequency, we start to stack on top of that. And you can take somebody from not knowing anything in a complex sport or skill set, and they can become extremely good very quickly. But there's one more piece I want to mention, which is that we need a review period. We need to go back and look over what we just did. So, for example, if I'm learning how to race a car, okay, if I go and take a lap, when I come back and I've completed the lap and I get out of the car, we need to review what just happened. And why you need to do this is because you need to get good at separating fact from opinion. The thing we all are very good at is beating ourselves and adding in our own emotional feelings about what we just did. Oh, I just sucked. That was horrible. I did bad. No. What are the facts? The facts are, maybe you were wrong an entry in this corner. You were too tight on that corner. Not enough speed here. Not enough brake there. Those are the facts. So all we do is we review back through your lap and we look at all the opinion, all the emotional stuff. We just leave that alone. And what this does is this gets you to very analytically review yourself, which hones in the core skills.
Yeah, this is why athletes watch tape, right? They watch themselves, because when you're in the moment and you're doing stuff, you may think you're amazing or you may think you're terrible. The reality is you don't have an objective perspective because you're in it, you're doing it. And so when we look back and see what's actually occurred, when we look at measurable numbers, when we look at actual data, when we look at, where things really are, we then have real perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you pointed out an important thing, like this mindset of beating ourselves up or this sort of idea, because again, we're comparing ourselves to the experts teaching us or where we're learning or people we've seen in the marketplace that are doing it better. You mentioned this earlier, but we all start at the level of suck. Like, everyone needs to understand that that's perfectly okay. Like, nobody makes fun of a baby for crawling before walking. They don't say, look at that little idiot. They can't even walk. What's wrong with you? Yeah. Right? We have to remember we're that baby in everything new that we're starting out. So as a property manager, if you're just starting to figure out maintenance coordination, or you're just starting to figure out, sales and how to close the deal and get people on, or you're always going to start at suck. And I think sometimes we're just afraid of sucking.
Yeah.
So we don't do it.
I will say this. You don't have to suck for very long. That's your choice. You have access right now to all the resources, information, people that you need. It's up to you how long you stay in that level of not being good or being really, really bad. So just like the baby starts off being bull, but it's not judging itself. So very quickly, baby's walking, right?
Yeah.
It usually doesn't take that much time to get up off the ground. Same thing here. So that's like the core framework that will help facilitate speed learning or a new topic. There's a couple other pieces that is worth mentioning. And one is that you need to get very good at living the future, meaning a future reality of you being amazing at this thing or you having this new skill set and living in that world very vividly. And when you can do that, it starts folding time and you get this quantum leap effect into the future to become that thing, to
So
have that skill set.
Would you say that's like just imagining yourself in that state of being really successful, being really good, being good at sales, being like just kind of imagining this?
I think now I want to set some context here. I don't think you need to, go and meditate with monks for this. I think you need to go into your special little room, get your blacked out eye mask on, and get your meditative trance music. This is something as simple as when you've had a great moment, you've closed the sale, anchor it in. Anchor in like this is how the future is going to be. This is like everyday occurrence. Like almost like, yeah, duh. Like that, of course I close that sale. That's all examples of how like on the fly, you can just start to build in these deep neural networks into this future you want for yourself. So at every opportunity that you can do it, you should be doing it. We don't need to fall back, retreat, and go meditate about this for days and years. I actually found that I could do because it doesn't actually choose there. It's much more powerful when I involve my five senses into the mix and I'm in the real world with my eyes open. I just had this experience and I kind of anchor that in to the overall vision that I want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think that's really powerful. I think one thing that I know I fail to do this is I'm so focused sometimes though on the future and what I want and need to do next and moving on to what's next. Because I'm in momentum that I don't take time to celebrate the wins. Like I don't acknowledge or celebrate the accomplishments that I've created or that I've had. And it's that act of will to pause yourself and to celebrate those wins, to reflect on the good that you've created and what you've accomplished, that really allows you and really anchors that into your subconscious and into your mind, that allows you to keep moving forward.
I think both of those pieces go hand in hand. Like you talk about like how do you manifest, how do you live your dreams? Like I think in simple terms it could be broken down into being very clear about what you want your future to be, living in that, and being very grateful for every piece that moves you further along the board. So most people, they take for granted all the good things that happen. They miss maybe the synchronicity or coincidence that happens on a daily basis. It's magically moving them forward along their path. They take those things for granted. They stop being thankful for those things, which again, I think that's another way of us creating a bottleneck. So take the time to be grateful for all those things as they're happening and allow that to further give you that momentum, give you that drive. And when we're only focusing on one thing, how easy is that? It's much easier to be grateful because you have more awareness. So it all fuels itself, this whole concept, what we've been talking about.
All right. So we've got so for speed learning, love the topic, break it into pieces, have some goals and some milestones that you can actually track. When you hit those, celebrate it, anchor it in, feel the positive vibes, about that, allow yourself to do that. And then frequency and recency. So make sure you're doing it and building it in over and over, repetition, and then stacking the next things on it.
Yep.
So you're doing that, and then make sure you review and analyze. So you're actually looking at the data, looking at the facts, and looking at your performance.
Yes.
Awesome. So, any other hacks when it comes to speed learning?
Yeah.
What are some of your cool little things that you like to,
I'll give you
that you know about speed learning
more.
that you like to do?
And it's not necessarily applicable to everything, but pre-shot routine. So in sports, it's the easiest to correlate and give you a story and give you kind of like a metaphor. Is, you know, before, like Michael Jordan talks about this, before he walked on the court and played a game, he played in his head 100 times. Tiger Woods would visualize the shot before he stepped up to the pin with his club and actually swung through the shot. The same thing we do with drivers that we work with and anything involved in sports is we have them before they even take the lap, as they're in the car at the start line, visualize the perfect lap. Everything goes right. Everything goes your way. Picture it, feel it, hear the sounds, add the color to it, and then stop, come back, open your eyes, and just go do it. So it's this process, and I learned this a long time ago. I can't remember from where, but it's like you go through, you mentally visualize, you distract yourself, and come back to the real world, and then you just go do it. And you do that enough times, that cycle, that 3-step cycle, and not only the amount of confidence it builds in yourself is amazing, like that deep trust, like, yeah, trust that I can do this, but it also propels the skill set that much further, like to where you never really have to, you hit this tipping point to where you never really have to question that again. Like Tiger Woods could be in a completely horrible mindset walking up to the next hole, right? Like he could have just screwed up that last hole walking towards the next one. But I guarantee, especially when he was in his prime, like not now, but when he was in his prime, by the time he walked up to the next hole and got into position and went through his pre-shot routine, he's completely forgot about what happened at the last one. And there was very few times you saw a guy like Tiger Woods crack that process and not do it that way, which is why he performed so well. Michael Jordan, the same thing. Like you never really saw him choke. You never really saw him hang on to the last mistake for too long. You watch football players, it's a Super Bowl, right? You got I love this, telling this story because it just happens almost every Super Bowl. You got the kicker. He misses like the most ridiculous, easy kick for, 2-point conversion, whatever he's going for. It's close. He should have made it. He misses. But then in the same game later on, he'll win twice as long at a more clutch moment. And it's only because he's forgotten and he's dropped the mistake. And he's just had that short memory and he's just kept moving. But also, he has a pre-shot routine. He has a process he follows before he does it, every single kick. If he didn't, he would be so inconsistent, it's not even funny. And so think of how you can apply that to your business. Think of how you can apply that to how you're handling people and situations.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, this ritual. You'll see people do a ritual when they do, a free throw shot in basketball. You'll see people do a ritual when they get up to the plate in baseball. You'll see Tony Robbins. You'll see before he goes out on stage. If you watch the Netflix sort of documentary that he's got up on there, you'll see him do this weird sort of ritual each time before he goes out on stage. And these movements, these actions, he's kind of anchored this sort of thing. That's an interesting idea, to add in a ritual into the actions that you're taking.
We started doing this. I did door-to-door sales in Detroit, Michigan for like 2 years. We did it then. I just didn't really know what we were doing. We had a full pre-shot routine. But now just picture this. Before every sales call, you picture that you're talking to your best friend. You picture that you're talking to somebody that you've known for years and you feel completely comfortable with. And you picture that it goes exactly your way. They sign up. It's a mutual benefit for both people to move forward on the deal, and you guys move forward. Just imagine before you hire every person that you were going to hire the perfect person for the job, and that after the training, they were going to perform the way you wanted them to. That's how you apply that to those situations, to the everyday business situations, is you just picture it going perfectly. Because not, why shouldn't it go perfect? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. Well, cool. Jameson, it's been awesome having you on. Lots of cool little ideas that you shared with us. Appreciate it, as before.
Thanks.
And how can people get in touch with you, or what do you want people to know listening to this?
I would say follow me on social media, because that's where I predominantly post. Like if you want to keep chasing content and hearing around the conversation of genius and speed learning and those sort of things, bring into more of your potential, then social media is a great place to follow me on. Also, optimizingman.com would be another place that regularly publishing content now to in and around the topic of peak potential, things like that. So I'd say those are the best places to get a hold of me and to kind of follow what I'm doing, get involved in more training and things like that.
Awesome. All right, Jameson, thanks so much for coming out here on the DoorGrow Show.
Thanks for having me.